Hi friends, welcome back to Roots Before Harvest. This week we're going to cover something that truthfully I never planned to teach on: widowhood and identity. The more that I studied Ruth and Naomi, the more I became aware of the heaviness that they carried out of Moab and into Bethlehem with them. These women, they weren't just looking for a second chance. They were carrying loss, they were carrying emptiness, and they were carrying social shame. It led me to ask a lot of questions. Two that stood out to me were, how did society receive them as they entered Bethlehem? And then, what did it look like for them to cultivate a rich life in Bethlehem as women without husbands, without children, without status? As my awareness of their reality grew, so did my ache, because truthfully, their struggle still echoes today. I recently read that 9 out of 10 women will spend some part of their lives as a widow. Let me say that again. 9 out of 10 women will spend some part of their lives as widows. Through death, divorce, emotional abandonment, there are going to be 9 of us out of 10 that will walk in some version of Naomi's road. When I realized that, and when we realize that as women, we realize that the book of Ruth stops sounding like a fairy tale romance and starts to feel like a survival story, a gospel of endurance and identity. It's the story of 2 women who learned to trust God with everything that they lost, and to believe that even when the world forgets them, heaven still calls them seen. When we see the weight of Naomi and Ruth and what they carried into Bethlehem, their widowhood, their barrenness, their uncertainty, I want us to hear how redemption begins to unfold in the ordinary. Because God doesn't step in with fanfare and fireworks for Ruth and for Naomi. He moves through faithfulness, through quiet courage of obedience. So let's pick up this week in Ruth 3, where Ruth takes her next step of brave faith and the Redeemer begins to move. Join me in Ruth 3, verse 1. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative, with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash therefore and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down there, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." And she replied, "All that you say, I will do." Join me again in verse 7. And when Boaz had eaten and drank, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. And then she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight, the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." And he said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you've not gone after a young man, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. And now it is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then, as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning." What I love so much about this passage is it is not dramatic. It's deeply human. There are 2 women who are navigating loss and risk, and God is meeting them in this quiet and faithful step of obedience. As we look closer in this passage on Ruth's story and her courage, it becomes aware that this is not about Boaz's kindness. It's about God's heart for the overlooked. The Hebrew word for widow is almānāh, which means the one who cannot speak for herself. This is where Ruth and Naomi's story begins. Voiceless, vulnerable, without protection or provision in a patriarchal world. But we know from the beginning of Scripture that God identifies himself with the widow. In Deuteronomy 10:18, he says, he defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow and loves the foreigner residing among you. In Exodus 22, verses 22 through 23, we hear, do not take advantage of the widow or the fatherless. If you do and they cry out to me, I will certainly hear their cry. I love this quote from Walter Brueggemann, who says, Yahweh is the one who takes sides with the marginal one, and his power is bent towards their liberation. And that's what we see in Ruth and Naomi, a God who bends towards the brokenhearted and who refuses to let them disappear. Even more so, in their world, barrenness was another kind of exile. A woman's worth was tied to her children, and the infertility carried shame. We see over and over, though, that God transforms barrenness into blessing. Look at Sarah, Rachel, Rebecca, Hannah, Elizabeth. Each of them began in emptiness and ended up as bearers of promise. Ruth joins this line of women, and her once empty womb becomes the birthplace of redemption itself. Hannah's song in 1 Samuel 28 declares, he raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. He sets them with princes and has them inherit a throne of honor. I love this quote from Sandra Ryder, which she says, in every generation, Yahweh chooses the powerless as the stage upon which his power is revealed. So when we read Ruth's story, we aren't just watching for their survival. We are quite literally watching theology come to life. God fills the world, what the world calls empty. By the time that Ruth and Naomi reach Bethlehem, they truly have nothing. They have no friends, no husband, no inheritance, no security. Yet God is already rewriting their story. Ruth says to Boaz, spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. She is not acting in desperation. She is acting in faith. N.T. Wright, the theologian, says that redemption in the biblical sense is not simply about rescued and being rescued. It is about being restored to the place where God always intended us to be. Let me say that one more time in case you didn't catch it. Redemption in the biblical sense is not about rescue. It is about being restored to the place where God has always intended us to be. And that is what is happening right here. God is restoring two women who have been forgotten, positioning them right into the middle of his redemptive plan. And when the women of Bethlehem cry out in Ruth 4:14, praise be to the Lord, whose day has not left you without a redeemer, they are declaring that it is not Boaz, but it is God who redeems what has not changed. I want to close this week with a truth that anchors me and has truly transformed my heart for when life feels uncertain. Carolyn Custis James says, a woman's high calling as an image bearer renders her incapable of significance, no matter what goes wrong and what is lost. Friend, this means that your worth isn't measured by your productivity, your relationships, or your success. It's grounded in the God whose image you carry. Tim Keller writes, we are more sinful and flawed than we ever dared to believe, yet more loved and accepted in Jesus than we ever dared to hope. Naomi and Ruth, they lived that reality before they could name it. Their faith didn't erase their grief, it transformed it into grace. And so maybe this week you are standing in a season of loss, in a season of waiting or feeling invisible. I pray that you would remember that God still bends towards the overlooked. He still plants redemption in the soil of your loss, and he still calls you significant, even when the world doesn't. Thank you for joining me this week. And as we go into next week, remember, build slowly, live faithfully, and reap what only God can grow.